Hello and welcome to KRSE Beyond the Ordinary Webcast Radio, where we look at a unique technique at forecasting the future. Here with your hosts, Nancy and Elena.
Yes, well, it's, as our guest, Clif, calls it, it's adventures in future viewing. Hi, Clif.
Hello.
Okay. Just the small introduction I put on the schedule has already elicited mails from people that know you.
Oh, uh-oh.
Well, let me just read you this last one that came in. Hi, Nancy. I hope you and Elena will consider having Clif on your program as a regular guest. He will keep your audience ahead of the curve with current and world events. I have followed him for years and have enjoyed every interview. His information is amazing, and in my opinion, he is a genius. We concur. I think you will agree when you hear him. You and your audience will enjoy listening to Clif, and you will experience a new awareness which his information will bring. I appreciate you and Elena's work. I love you.
Cool.
So look at that. There's a review ahead of time.
Yeah. That's the way to do it. Now we just shut everything off and go out on a high note.
Oh, there you go. And we'd have a lot of angry listeners. What are you doing? Well, Clif, on your website, Half Past Human, which right away intrigued me, because that is very interesting, and at some point I'd like to know why you named it that. But you wrote that about all of the things that you are doing, and you say, in part, the control freaks, this is in 2008 and 2009 little review, are really going to try to hang on, and it looks like 2008 will be a very interesting year. Did you ever predict that well?
Yeah, I think we got that one. That's fairly clear, and we've been getting better with our accuracy rates on individual days and getting the emotional tones that will be showing up in the language of that time. We have to bear in mind that our site is entirely about radical linguistics, which is a subset of advanced symbology. And so Half Past Human has some inherent, just the name itself has some inherent linguistic triggers that we put together with that juxtaposition. And so we've created tension in our name, and yet intriguing, and it has certain connotations, and it goes all the way through. There's layers upon layers upon layers of radical linguistics out and about in the universe to explore, and we find that like good Aikidoists, if we harmonize with universe, then good things comes our way. And we've been able to snoop up around a bit and give a lot of people a heads up as to what may be occurring. And that helps. I mean, it's actually amazing. We didn't know that in the beginning that putting it out would do anything other than stir up a hornet's nest. And we've been favored by universe in the sense that it seems to help calm things down, and there's more people that are prepared to cope and deal with things as an adult.
That's exactly true. A lot of what you write has that theme of, Nancy and I are Aikidoka, so we totally understand that concept. And let's just back up a little bit, and for listeners that don't know anything about you, this amazing project that you've developed employs a technique based on radical linguistics to reduce extracts from readings of dynamic postings on the Internet into an archetypical database. Now, those extracts are somehow you have managed to extract, intuit, or with your software, whatever, bring out the emotional content of what people are dynamically writing about.
Yeah, it's not that mysterious, really, when you think about it, because if you think about humans and language serves two functions. Say 1% of language is mundane in the sense of, pass me the salt, right? The rest of language is really about expressing our emotions and trying to fit ourselves into the universe and come up with a coherent and cogent, rational explanation for who we are and how we're relating with this strange, crazy place that we find ourselves in. And so most of language is actually emotionally tinged. And so what we did, or what I did way back when, was to decide, well, that's basically a true statement, and therefore if I could get in and weasel out of each word what its emotional parameters were, then I could kind of like read the underlying emotional waves, if you will. Sort of makes sense?
Yeah.
It does.
Okay, so what I did was I had a friend of mine who in England who was involved with some work with Oxford, and he gave me a copy of the Oxford English Dictionary in digital format as a lexicon, which is to say just the words with no definitions. And I started building from there and built a complex, maybe even overly so, multi-dimensional array that allows me to hang, if you will, emotional values relative to a word. And then I just decided that, well, a specific word like fear would have this emotional value and it would be represented by this number. And a word like joy would have another emotional value and it would be represented by this other number. And so I could make mathematical sort of comparisons by basically adding and subtracting and dividing all the numbers back and forth. And that's kind of what we do. And it's done on a massive scale, of course, and then it provides us with all these numbers. And I actually have to back up and say that the basic premise, beyond the understanding of language is 99.99% emotional, the basic premise is that all humans are psychic, whether they realize it or not, and that psychicness leaks out of us all the time. And so if we're aware of something coming, it impinges on our feelings, and being who we are, we must express that. Even if we're not conscious of it, we'll express some of that impingement on our emotional stability through the words that we're writing, talking to, Aunt May about the chocolate cake, and we'll just use a particular set of words relative to chocolate cake that you don't usually see relative to chocolate cake, and then we find out, those words have an emotional content that really is saying some other archetypical kind of thing is coming. And so we just sort of make guesses at it, and we've been getting pretty good at our guesses.
The graphics that you have on one of your page on the future link is fabulous in how an event unfolds and what the observer and each of us can see, but because of so many events getting mixed up, that the last little graphic, this is what the observer sees, is why it is so difficult, and why who people have an intuition about something, they don't have the training to unscramble that, so they may go in the wrong direction.
And frequently do so. I mean,
yes.
You see that examples of that constantly. Like just recently, the October 14th, spaceship coming to hover over Atlanta or whatever it was.
Yes.
That indeed may have been a very valid premonition, but because of mental noise, you'd basically have no way of knowing how much your mind is impinging upon that and putting in its own filter set.
Exactly. So you developed software for this?
Sure, that's actually, most of the software is very mundane. It's the same kind of stuff that Google or Yahoo or any of these people use to search the internet for their indexing. In fact, I was just doing it ahead of them for a different purpose. But much of what I'm doing is now within the mainstream of what's called semantic search engines. And it's merely understanding how words are relative to each other. Some of our software is rather unique because it's written in Prolog, which is an artificial intelligence language, and it interacts with words in a different way than, for instance, most of the Yahoos and the Googles ever will, because they're not out to predict the future with it. They're out to tell you what's there now. And what's there now is interesting, but I was much more interested in what the future offered, so I started getting into what we call the woo-woo side of it all, and into radical linguistics, and looking for archetypes. Again, something that Google and Yahoo probably don't do. And archetypes abound all over. We find out, for instance, that, as I say, everybody's psychic, and the universe is talking to us constantly, providing archetypes and guidance and all different kinds of things. And if we were just astute enough, we would be able to navigate things a whole lot better. So the more aware you become, the more sensitized you become to how the universe talks, and then you become more cognizant of it. It talks to you more, and it starts this nice little positive feedback loop. And that's kind of where our software works. But as I say, most of it is relatively mundane C and Perl scripts that just bring up web pages and slice and dice them based on the words and that kind of thing. So really, it's in the beginning of our work, everybody was focused on the software, and it's like, no, really, it's not about the computers. It's about the language, and the computers are merely a tool.
The information you receive has to be beyond massive.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah. But I used to work for phone companies and these kind of people in places like Microsoft and GEC Marconi and Chrysler and all these guys who have big, giant databases that need to be scrubbed and massaged and so on. And I'm something of what's known as